Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my new YouTube channel, Patrick Goes Wild. You are tuned in to Wild and Live. Thanks for joining us. For those of you that are new to this show, what are we doing? We're looking at some of the coolest and freshest animals on the planet. And so far, we've been lucky enough to have been joined by some incredible guests so far. Last week, adventurer Aldo Kane gave us a first-hand account of the thrilling experience of climbing inside a volcano. I know it had a lot of you guys gripped, definitely had me gripped as well. On our last episode, we were joined by zoologist and conservation biologist Lara Jackson. She gave us some brilliant facts about the dolphin family and touched on her work out in Zanzibar, where she's working with African Impact. She was out there helping local communities, in particular former fishermen, to find and develop sustainable ways and methods of hosting dolphin friendly eco tours. If you want to find out more about that episode or any other episode that's gone out so far, after this live stream, you can go ahead and take a look at the video list and take a look at episode 6. I think we were with Lara. Right, I think it's almost time to introduce our next guest. But before I do, a reminder for all our existing and new viewers, go ahead and take a few seconds, if you can, to click that button down below, that subscribe button. We're almost up to 100 subscribers, which I'm really, really excited about. So thank you so much for your support. It truly means a lot. Right, let's get into it. Today's guest is a biologist and filmmaker. His thirst for adventure has taken him to some of the most remote places on the planet, from the Mayan temples of Mexico to the heart of the Amazon rainforest. When it comes to animals, he's all about finding the rarest of the rare, what he likes to call wildlife holy grails. Dan O'Neill, are you wild and live? Yeah, good. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Dan, you spend a lot of your time traveling to some of the most remote places on the earth. I have had the opportunity to work in jungles myself, so I know how tricky it can be. What is it about those types of locations that keeps you wanting to go back for more?
And they have a lot of these similar behaviors, but the way that they cock their head and they have a lot of personality, and it's a very strange, kooky animal, very different to the others. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've got another question. You know what, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've made a little bit of a boo-boo. I've just been checking the stream, and I think our sound's been all over the gaff. For those of you, if we haven't been streaming with sound, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize. Dan's been telling us about his time out in the Philippines working with the Philippine Eagle. He's a patron of
Tech.
Oh my goodness. This is, I'm loving this. I am absolutely loving this.
So comments about
you know what, actually someone has This is brilliant. This is why I love doing lives, because anything can go right, anything can go wrong. Yeah, Dan, it's great to have you. You probably missed a little bit of what we were talking about. I was asking Dan about his travels around to Southeast Asia.
Whistle stop.
You mentioned that whistle stop recap. That Vietnam is the 14th most biodiverse country in the world, 16th most biodiverse country in the world, and one of his favorite countries is Guyana. You were telling us the story. Let's do a really quick recap of why your experience in St. Lucia when you were a child with your father. Tell us about that, and we'll go back to, and then we'll jump over onto pangolins.
Yeah, of course. Well, my dad was he's a computer scientist now, but he was a physicist, and that's kind of an area of science that is, confined a lot to a small space. He works entirely from a tiny office, and he used to he still does love to sail. And so when we were younger, we would every couple of years we would go on a trip somewhere far afield, and he took us once to St. Lucia, Central America areas, and we'd sail around. And he took us to this fantastic, incredible, amazing, biodiverse, colourful jungle in St. Lucia, and that's kind of where it all sparked for me. This kind of obsession with South America, but that had all originally came from when we used to live in California when I was a kid. And we had all of these animals flying around us, the hummingbirds and these giant banana slugs, and trying to catch hummingbirds in jars. Don't do that. But yeah, no, absolutely loved it. And then the obsession of then coming back to England and it being such a massive culture shock. Coming back to, in my eyes back then, I'm not insulting British wildlife, absolutely love it, but it was dreary England for me at that time. And then, it just kind of sparked this whole journey of wanting to learn more about South America and eventually get out there myself.
Yeah, we're going to get onto South America shortly. Let's round up on your time in Southeast Asia. Despite being home to such a wonderful array of different species and having so many different biodiversity hotspots, it's a lot of Asia's animals are under threat, including one which is one of the most trafficked mammals on the planet. In fact, it's the only mammal to have scales. Tell us about this charming character.
Pangolins.
Yes.
Yeah, I love pangolins. They're absolutely adorable. Tongues longer than their body, Asian species. But there's eight species of pangolin. There's crazy. Oh my God, when you see one up close, it's mad. It's amazing. That's another thing. Like when you see these animals and they're mammals just like us, and you just see their kind of crazy adaptations that they've had over hundreds of thousands, millions of years. It's mad seeing this tiny, like tube-like face with this little hole at the end, and then this proboscis-like giant, this tongue that can like whip in and out extremely fast, really sticky. We were doing an operation on a pangolin. A friend of mine, Jess, in Vietnam. She's the vet for Save Vietnam's Wildlife. This fantastic organization that protects not just pangolins but loads of other different sorts of Vietnamese animals. And she was, this pangolin had been bought in from the trade. The illegal wildlife trade, and they can often get they can seize sometimes 200 individual pangolins going off from the border to China or to Myanmar, and they tie them up in these really tight bags. But they're often caught with so many different kinds of traps. It could be a snare trap, it could be like a kind of spring bear trap kind of thing. And this particular pangolin, she had a giant wound here on her chest that had already started to heal in the corners, meaning that she'd had it for probably a couple of weeks, a long time, that she'd been living with it in the trade before she was rescued. And while we were, I was basically, she just asked for me to take ticks off to get the parasites off, because underneath every single scale, you'd see aggregations of loads and loads and loads of ticks, and it's so important to get those off. Because in the trade, they're all bunched together, all these pangolins, and it's just a perfect breeding forum for parasites, and the ticks just run rife around them, and underneath all the scales are these giant aggregations, and you have to take those out because that's often how they might die. The wound here, she puts antibiotics on it, she heals it up, she gets it all ready, but actually the problem could be that underneath the pangolin scale could be a giant aggregation of ticks, and when they're in there in such high numbers, they can actually cause another wound, and then that can become septic without anybody seeing it because it's underneath these scales. So it's so
right, of course,
them to pull back and pick all of the scales and make sure that there's no other wounds that you've missed. It's the one problem with being the only mammal on the planet that's entirely covered in scales. You've kindly shared with us one of those videos. I'm going to play that, and so everybody at home can have a little look. So let's see if we can play this video right now.
Oh God! Help with the ticks. If you see one,
so what we're looking at right now,
see one, say something.
Is that exact moment when you're picking up this vial full of ticks?
So what happens? We're pulling off all the ticks, and you just plop them into that bottle of alcohol so that they die instantly. But before that, the pangolin's been put on the table, and a lot of the ticks have actually dislodged or come undone or are moving around. So the table's got these ticks running around all over the table, and you're picking them up.
Oh God, disgusting.
I mean, and imagine, like, we're disgusted by that, yeah? But imagine being in a giant truck, tied in a tiny bag, really, really tight. So it's these netted bags, and they can't undo. So they're all curled up for protection. They can't undo themselves. They're all piled on top of one another, and those parasites are just running rife all over them. And it's just, it's awful. And those will then be there. And Vietnam is one of these giant, massive players in the illegal wildlife trade. And not just as a consumer, it's actually one of the highest, if not the highest consumer of rhino horn in the planet, much higher than China. But it's the forum by how they get across to other countries.
So here's a question for you, Dan. Why is such a unique mammal like the pangolin being trafficked in secrecy and behind closed doors?
Well, it's a protected species on CITES, so that's obviously one major reason why people are doing it behind closed doors. But they do it for the for food. People eat, it's a delicacy to eat pangolin, but also their scales, which are made of the same, as many people already know, the same chemical compound structure as our hair and our fingernails, same as rhino horn, keratin, that they use to treat a whole host of different ailments. It could be for cancers, it could be for thyroid problems, it could be for anything. I mean, as Megan McCubbin was saying recently, she worked out with the bear bile rehab and farms. And
oh yeah, I've heard about this.
Coronavirus.
That's absolutely mad. I saw this a couple of weeks ago. That bear bile is being touted as some sort of miracle cure for coronavirus, which sounds absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, I've not spent too much time with those farms and understand too much of that situation, but yeah, Megan would be able to talk a lot about that. But it's awful. I mean, there's so much that they're using these things for that they have absolutely no corroboration for, no scientific evidence to say that it works. And I actually genuinely believe that the people selling these things, a lot of the time, they don't believe it themselves, because they're actually, I mean, Aldo is doing the tiger trafficking show, the count recently.
That's right.
And they're now, from my situation in South America, they're actually, there's a lot of Chinese companies that have moved in to do logging concessions, mining concessions. They're buying up a lot of the land there. And actually, I've been told that indigenous people have been told to capture jaguars and bring them in, and they're shipping those jaguar parts, bones, and different parts of the jaguars back to Asia, and they're selling parts as tiger products. So they know it's not tiger, they know it's not the same thing, but it's this giant business. I mean, the illegal wildlife trade is the fourth largest illegal business on the planet after drugs, counterfeiting and human trafficking, and it's worth about 21 billion pounds a year. And it's just, when it becomes that, it's not about what it is. I mean, these people using these products, they're just being duped. They're being duped.
It just seems like it's a way to make money indiscriminately. Let's move on to something a bit more light-hearted. Here's a question for you, Dan. Have you heard of the pangolin song?
I've not heard of the pangolin song.
Have you not?
I don't think I have.
Should I give you a little rendition of the chorus?
Oh, please.
Are you ready? Everybody at home? This is how it goes, and I want you to. I'm gonna do the chorus, the first line of the chorus, and I want you to jump in straight away. Are you ready? You ready, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple of words. It goes, "Don't you eat my pangolin friend."
It's one.
That's your turn.
Oh, and I have to say this.
Yes, you do.
Don't you eat my pangolin friend.
Oh, you went for the bass there.
Change things up, Patrick. This is no.
Obviously, we're having a bit of fun here. We're joking, I suppose. So that particular song, I'll put a link in the description of this video. Yeah, of course. That particular song was written by Max Demers and Blair Carson. And I suppose the point that I want to make is that there are lots of people around the world that are trying to raise awareness when it comes to certain animals that are in big trouble. And Save Vietnam's Wildlife are doing exactly that. They're one of those people. How is their work having a positive impact on Vietnam's wildlife?
Oh, it's massive. It's huge. I mean, when I first went there, it's not just, the thing is, Save Vietnam's Wildlife are amazing, and they do huge numbers of things with pangolins and the binturongs and the Asian leopard cats and everything else. But actually, they exist in this one park in the north of Vietnam called Cuc Phuong, which also has, it's a national park. So there's animals that live there. There's civet cats, all these different kinds of animals that live there. But the Save Vietnam's Wildlife Center is also right next to the Endangered Primate Rescue Center and the Turtle Conservation Center, two other organizations that do really, really important work for the primates of Vietnam. They've got, I think it's something like 16 or 17 of the 25 primates, 25 primates that live in Vietnam are endangered in some form, and they're all protected in some form there. But they do, and the Turtle Conservation Center for me is massive, because actually that's why I first came out to Vietnam. I learned about this giant turtle, this incredible species called the giant Yangtze soft-shell turtle, and it's the largest freshwater turtle species on the planet, and it's a massive cultural importance to Vietnam. There's this lake in Hanoi, the capital, called Hoan Kiem Lake, which directly translates to Sword Lake, and in it, until 2016, there was this giant turtle that lived there, and they gave him this affectionate name Ku Rua, which was it means great grandfather turtle, and he basically was given this story that he saved Vietnam from occupation of the Chinese. So they really
I like that name, great grandfather.
Yeah, but they eat them there in Vietnam, and it's not just these giant turtles. Those ones are now functionally extinct. There's only 3 non-breeding adults left in the entire world of that species, 3 individual animals, and all of these other turtle species in Vietnam many of them are endangered, and they all go to this turtle conservation center when they're seized. And because people don't really identify with turtles, especially not the freshwater soft-shelled ones, because they look a little uglier than the sea counterparts, people don't identify with them, and so they don't get funding, and no one really gives them a lot. And Save Vietnam's Wildlife do incredible work, and so do the Endangered Primate Rescue Center. They do loads of amazing work, and they need more funding. But I would say the Turtle Conservation Center, that just gets left. They have in there incubators for the turtles are made of old fridges that this guy he just cranked them around and turned them into incubators because they don't have money to get real incubators. So yeah, they're doing incredible work. They go out and collect leaves for the primates every single day, because those langurs need a special mineral they're now finding that's in those leaves, and they can't be found anywhere else in the world. So those particular leaf-eating langurs, they couldn't have them in a zoo in America or a zoo in Europe, because they don't have that naturally occurring chemicals that they need in those leaves. So yeah, incredible, really important work. And in the Endangered Primate Rescue Center, they house 5 cat bar langurs, the second most endangered primate in the world. And
so they're doing lots of great work to support not just pangolins. You've got turtles, langurs, primates, all sorts. I want to move on from your time in Southeast Asia, because it's not just the forests of Asia that you frequent and that you like to explore. You have a particular passion for probably the most famous rainforest, the Amazon rainforest. Now, I want to try and give people at home a sense of scale of the Amazon, and that's why I'm going to ask you this next question. Which country is the Amazon rainforest in?
Well, you can't answer that question, because it's across almost all of the South American countries. But it's absolutely giant. Primarily in Brazil, of course, because Brazil goes right into the center. But it goes through Colombia, goes through all of them. Yeah, everywhere. But actually, the top where I go a lot, everybody always connects them all and says that that's all one big jungle. But actually, the forest that connects the Amazon at the top changes into the Guiana Shield, because this giant granite dome at the top of South America, it makes this different kind of structure, different kind of substrate, these giant, great big mountain frames, and that's actually called the Guiana Shield, that top bit. But it's
and the Guyana Shield, that covers Guyana, Suriname. Is it Suriname?
Yeah.
Am I getting this correct? And one other country,
Venezuela.
French Guyana.
French Guiana. It's in Venezuela. So when you look at, I don't know if you've seen the film Up, the Pixar film.
Of course,
yeah.
I have.
So that Paradise Falls, that's in Venezuela. So those things they're all these are like real structures. They look like they're not real, but oh my God, one of my dream places to go in the entire world, I'm desperate to go there, and I will go there one day, is this fantastic tepui or table mountain called Roraima. Oh my God, it's amazing. And it is this giant, great big juts up at the side, and then the top is completely flat. I think they went up there very briefly and lost land to the jaguar, but it's another world. These tepuis, these giant tabletop mountains in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of the Amazon. Yeah, that's my dream.
If you ever get to go there, Dan, I am shotgunning a space with you. It would be incredible to visit one of those tapuis. They're kind of almost like islands in the sky. Dan, what you've described so far sounds beautiful and idyllic, but some of the animals, the species that you like to call your wildlife holy grails, aren't necessarily everybody's cup of tea. We're going to talk about, see if we can fit in 3 more animals that we'd like to talk about. Touch on the harpy eagle and jaguars very, very briefly, but we're going to start on an animal that you got very close to. It's the largest, heaviest of its kind. It possesses the ability to liquefy its prey. Dan, this literally sounds like the thing of nightmares, but you got your face right next to one. Tell us about this, this alien sounding
Goliath bird-eating spider. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty cool. I'm not gonna stand here and pretend that I'm like, I'm really hard with these. I absolutely can't. I can't do it. I can't get super close. I love them. I'm honestly, I love bugs. I love snakes. I love them all. I find them all really fascinating. But just like the moment you get in your face really close to a spider, like the Goliath bird-eating spider, to be like, so this is the sound. It's terrifying, horrible, and it moved, and that wasn't fun. No, but I got really, really close to one there. Interestingly, many animals like these, right, and poison dart frogs and others, you won't find them in an area at all. So you won't find them. So there's one particular area of Guyana, none. You'll never find them. But in this other place, bloody everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
And why were you hunting down this spider? Why were you trying to find the Goliath bird-eating spider?
So actually, that was that bird-eating spider. I'd always wanted to see one, and because, as I was just saying to you, I'd used to work out in Guyana as a research capacity, and we'd go to all these different places, but we didn't go to any of these really perfect spots for them. And so I never seen one before when I was doing all this time as a researcher. But then when I went to find the harpy eagle, we went to this really, really remote place, very far up in the jungle, and it just happened to be the perfect breeding ground for Goliath bird-eating spiders. So when we're walking down the path every day to find, or every night, to find the harpy and to go into a new spot, they were just running around rampant everywhere. And then this one was a particularly large individual. But you can coax them out of their burrows relatively easily because they're ambush predators. They don't eat birds, actually, at all. People think that they might, but actually they're nocturnal. They hunt primarily during the night, so obviously they're not going to catch any birds, are they? But they sit in these burrows, and you can just move like a stick in front of it, and then it goes, and it's horrible. Yeah.
Sounds horrible, but it also sounds pretty amazing to be able to see an animal like that.
Awesome.
Like I said, it's the heaviest spider in the world. I know that females tend to live longer than the males. I think the males live for about 3 to 5 years, and some of the females can reach about 10, maybe 15 years, if I've got that correct.
Yeah, I mean, like with many spiders, like the males tend to be a little bit smaller than the females. Males are still quite big with these guys, though. But it's a very, very different. The spiders are strange creatures.
Let's move on from the strange creatures then, and talk about your time filming harpy eagles and jaguars. Probably pretty high up on your wildlife holy grails. Can you give us a little bit of information on both of those species? They're both very different, but inhabit similar types of ecosystems. What was that like, trying to track these animals down and film them?
Well, the harpy was an interesting one because they are really difficult to find. If you went to South America to look for a harpy eagle and you didn't really have anything in place to find one, it's really very, very unlikely that you'll see them.
And why is that?
Well, it's because with large eagles, and it goes exactly the same for trying to conserve them. You need to find where they're nesting, and if you can find a nest, then you have a pretty good chance of seeing that bird, because obviously they're so massive. They are apex predators in their own systems. Harpy eagles really never come down to the forest floor. So if you look at the rainforest in strata, the jaguar is the apex predator of the ground, but the harpy is by far the apex predator of the air. And they really, if you can get really close to that nest, and they are not going to give a. That's exactly what happened when we went there. But they're hard to find because if you don't get that perfect moment when they're still in the nest or raising the chick, they're gone. And we got there. I'd spoken to a friend of mine, an indigenous man called Kenneth, and he said, there is this fantastic nest. And my friend Ashley Holland can take you there. And Ashley's this fantastic guide. He knows everything about the jungle. And he was like, yeah, man, I'll take you up there. But when we get there, he
I like that. Yeah, man. I'll take you to see
he's
some
so
endangered
cool.
birds.
He's the coolest man in the world. But when we got there, he's like, just gonna level with you, Dan. The chick has fledged. And we're like, oh, great, great. So we get there, and it was big. It was really, it was a scary time because I wasn't going there just for myself at this point. Like, I was taking this girl I know called Natasha. She's a mathematician up at Sheffield University, and she'd been dreaming of seeing this bird for years and years and years and years. And I was kind of taking her to show her this dream of hers and to make it become a reality. And when we got to this nest, it wasn't there. And I was so certain because we'd gone through this whole thing. We got this chainsaw up with us, and we're like chainsawing through the trees that are full.
So how did you find this harpy eagle? You were meant to be able to track it down because you had a nest that you were going to be staking out. No nest.
Yeah, well, there was a nest. This is the thing. The nest was there, right? And
but the chicken
this
fledged.
is when it's about the biology, because harpy eagles, you know, they fledge, right? And the parents don't seem to be there, but they typically will spend between 1.5 to 2 years at the nesting site being fed by the parents, because the parents put in so much energy into raising this chick. They'll only have one chick every 2 to 3 years. And so they're sure that they want to keep that chick alive, so they'll actually come back and keep feeding this fledging chick for 2 years, and it will stay within the natal area within around 100 meters of the nest for about that 2 year period. And that's exactly what happened. And we waited and we waited and we waited for a week at this nest every day.
A week. Oh my goodness.
My camera sat there, and I wasn't filming anything because it's on end trigger, which is the thing where you actually keep recording and deleting everything, and then you press the button and it takes the last 8 seconds. So I was actually sat there for a week with my finger poised like this. Oh god, this is a lesson in patience. I was sat there just waiting for this bird to fly into the nest, like, oh, this is great fun. Eventually the mum came, the chick came, there was all this stuff, and I went beep, and I got those 8 seconds, and it was brilliant. Yeah, got the.
That sounds amazing. So for all the kids of you out there that are watching, Dan's waited a week for 8 seconds worth of film, but I'm sure it was super worth it. I want to touch on your experience trying to film jaguars. A question for you, Dan: how can you tell the difference between a jaguar and a leopard?
Okay. It's actually relatively simple. So leopards have a kind of they're very similar form. They're a lot less chunky, much smaller muscles around the jaw, because jaguars have the largest bite force of any large cat, pound for pound. But it's also in their spots. So jaguars have rosetted spots, which have a kind of like black part in the middle. If you look up rosettes, you'll understand. And leopards are more of a sort of they're less hollow. It's a difficult kind of like broken spots. Each one is like a couple of broken spots. But jaguar,
like open rosettes.
Yeah, open rosettes. Yeah. And a jaguar has these beautiful, enclosed, thicker, darker rosettes. But yeah.
For me, there are only 2 ways that I can ID them, you know, on seeing a picture very quickly, and one is by the size. Jaguars do look more muscular, and the fact that leopards aren't native to South America, so I'm always trying to look at the background to see does that look like African savanna, or
yeah,
does
of course.
It look like
well, if you see a leopard, if you see one in a tree,
rainforest?
that's most likely going to be a leopard, because jaguars don't really climb up trees. And there is one amazing place where they do actually do that. But leopards are much more slender, much more typically cat-like. Jaguars, if you look at one and you think, oh, that's got a kind of bulldogish appearance, it's probably much more likely to be a jaguar, because they do have that. But they're all so characterful. They have so many. You can see one picture of a jaguar and another picture of a jaguar, and one looks really grizzly and one looks really slender, and yeah, they look really different.
So this cat has the strongest bite force of any cat, pound for pound, but you decided that you were going to try and find one. What tactics did you use to try and find this magnificent regal creature?
Well, first off, I went with Ash again. Ashley and his son Shannon went with them. These guys know everything. We went out to this really very, very remote place in Guyana called the ARYEE. We went up to the headwaters of the ARYEE River. We were kind of like on this expedition trying to find animals that had never seen people before. And we were going up and up and up, and we saw amazing things. I mean, I filmed 21 tapirs while I was going up there. Capybara, loads of giant otters, fantastic birds. I saw my first Guyana red Katinga up there. Stunning. Oh my God. And possibly the most amazing thing. I mean, this is for like hardcore birders, but the crested eagle is a much rarer eagle than the harpy eagle. And we saw a black morph of it. So it's, the rarest of the rare. Anyway, that was amazing. But
So why do you go on these types of expeditions? And because you call these animals your wildlife holy grails, are you working with scientists? Is it that you just want to capture these incredibly rare species to share what they're like, their characters and their behavior with everybody at home? What is it for you? Like when you distill it down, what's your kind of driving force, Dan?
Well, I think it's kind of story driven in a way, because like there's all these animals. I mean, the jaguar was one I wanted to see for years. I mean, 8 years I was working in these kinds of environments trying to look for a jaguar, and people would come back and they'd seen one, and I'd be like, great, I'm so happy for you. But I like wouldn't see one myself. And so there's that driving force in that, like these kind of like incredible animals, like a jaguar, it's like something from another world. The same from a harpy eagle, the Philippine eagle. They're all animals that like have this kind of mythology attached to them, and that's kind of when I want to do it. But the other side is it's an adventure, it's a journey, and I just love that idea that while I'm going on this crazy adventure trying to find this animal, there's this story attached to it. I have a purpose. And it's like whether I'm going to a place that maybe no one's ever been before, or I'm trying to, and it's the fact that it might not happen, and the fact that if you're going super remote, you might not get it, and that nearly did happen with the jaguar. I mean, we went to the very headwaters, we were out there, living out there for over a month, and we didn't see it. And it wasn't until, I know this sounds so ridiculous, but it genuinely was not until the last 3 days that we were coming right back down the river, and we had it on full pelt. We were going because there was no chance we were going to see it anymore. We weren't like going, it was on full tilt. And Shannon, eagle-eyed Shannon, front of the boat, just goes, jaguar, 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 jaguar. And it took me ages to kind of like decipher the image, because they're so hidden. But yeah, it's that moment. And then when you've been working this whole time with scientists, with people, with everyone trying to make this thing happen, and then that moment either you get it, or the harpy that Natasha got it, and you get to have that kind of cathartic, like, it's happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
Having looked or trying to track down an animal for a month, and it coming down to those last 3 days must be super, super thrilling. Dan, I'm going to see if we've got any questions for you. Let's have a look. Thanks, Liz Daly, for helping reminding us that we need to turn the sound on. That's great. So we've got Ben Harris has got a couple of questions. He says, are the ticks hard to pull off, and is there a special tick removal technique?
I'm definitely not an expert, but I don't remember them being too difficult. Very similar to, well, actually, I don't know if you've ever had many ticks on you, but that's another thing you get in the Amazon. Absolutely bloody millions of ticks. Because talk about in Borneo, and you get loads of leeches. My friend Daya Ward could tell you about leeches. But you don't really get a lot of leeches in the Amazon. At least from my experience, I haven't had too many leeches, at least up in the north in Guyana. But ticks, absolutely millions of them. I'll just look down and I'm like, more ticks. They love to go to little places that have that are hidden. So they'll go into your armpits. They like to go around your t-shirt line on your neck. And there's one particular area that they just love to go as well.
I think we should stop there.
But yeah, then you can pull. It's kind of like it's a prod and a twist, and then out it comes. But yeah, you've got to be careful though too, because you don't want to get the head stuck in there, because that can cause some problem.
That's true. Guys, we're going to wrap up very, very shortly. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we're only just scratching the surface, and I could literally talk to you for hours. I just want to see if we've got any more questions as we kind of come to the end. If you've got any questions, these are your last few minutes to pop them into that little chat box, and hopefully we can get down to answer your questions. Before we do go, I want to know what's next for you, Dan. What adventures have you got coming up?
It's a funny time to ask that question, Patrick.
What adventures do you have planned once we're allowed to be free-range humans once again?
Yeah, well, I based on the situation with what's going on at the moment, when things open up again and things lessen down, I'm going back to Vietnam to kind of follow the story of primates, specifically the grey shank duke, and how they're used in monkey wine. So they basically embalm them, effectively put them in these great big bottles of alcohol, and then they let them ferment in there. And it's this big underbelly industry that's happening a lot in the north with this critically endangered primate that's on the 25 most endangered primates in the world. Really, really sad story. Beautiful color, one of the most colorful creatures on the planet. But going back to follow that story. And then next year, got some exciting plans with the Philippine Eagle Foundation and going to some newfound lands. But yes.
Like I said, I think we could chat for ages. Actually, two more questions. I want to hear one of your more charming stories. It seems the thing about you is that you are really passionate about animals. You are really passionate about wildlife, and you do have a soft spot for them, despite all the different or the challenging moments and encounters that you tend to have with these animals. I've just seen a video of you with a little tiny baby pangolin on your shoulder. What are baby pangolins like?
Oh my God.
Give us a little
I was
insight.
not expecting this at all, and it was a sad situation because that pangolin had just been brought in from the trade, and it was brought in at the same time as the other one. But they weren't mum and daughter. But the most amazing, adorable thing about pangolins in the entire world is that it's really important that they have that connection, whether it's with a warm human or their mother. And so a lot of times, if there's a baby animal and it's being rehabbed or whatever, you're supposed to stay away. You're not supposed to touch them too much, and it's not supposed to happen like that. But with baby pangolins, let me just chuck that over there. With baby pangolins, you do need to do that. And this baby pangolin was climbing up my arm, holding on really tight. And they've got this incredible grip, really, really strong, powerful grip, because when they're in the wild, they have to grip onto their mother's tail as they're going up into the trees. And so he was trying to do that. It was crawling up my arm and holding on super, 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 super tight. And yeah, otherworldly experience seeing an animal like that. Yeah, man.
Yeah. So you were at that moment playing mum to a beautiful little tiny pangolin.
Oh, and just quickly add to that, one of
yes.
the most amazing things is pangolins can actually go from that state, that really young state, be raised up in captivity and can successfully be released into the wild, unlike so many other mammals, like primates, that would never be able to be possible. But they can raise them up from babies. They can do all that stuff, put them into their semi-wild enclosure that saves Vietnam's wildlife, and those baby pangolins can actually go back into the wild and live successful lives, which I think is just really cool.
For everybody that's watching, for all the young boys and all the young girls out there that are inspired by what you do and want to become adventurers and explorers, they want to have that as their job. What advice can you give them, and where and how can they start?
It's an interesting one. I think there's so many different methods of going to remote places, working in jungles or mountains or wherever. But for me, my particular way was to study biology, to work really hard in that area of science. I mean, I loved science at school. I was obsessed with biology. But then that kind of natural progression took me to uni to study it. And when you go to university to study biology, there are just so many opportunities for you to get into different places. I mean, field courses in biology at university could take you to Borneo. They could take you to South Africa. They could even take you to the Arctic. There's one at my university, Sheffield University, where I'm doing my PhD actually in January now, in September next year. They have this amazing field course where they take people up to Arctic Sweden, and you can see what's happening with climate change up there. But they also go to Borneo. And I think it's those things. It's getting those connections, because once you start meeting people in these countries and then you're hearing their stories, that's kind of where you open those doors. And that's what happened with me in Guyana, because I met these indigenous people. I met Ashley, and then it just kind of expands.
It kind of snowballs from there. So, you mentioned uni. Many of our viewers are a couple of years away from uni, at least a decade away. What can young people do at this stage? I mean, would you encourage them to start using their phones to film wildlife and make their own little kind of wildlife shows. You know, what can young 6-year-old Sally do to get her, you know, to get some sort of experience? You know, she can't fly to Borneo. What can she do at home?
Well, like, that's the most amazing thing about wildlife films and stuff, because you can start filming little animals and making little videos and things with nothing. You can use a phone, you can use a big camera, but really, I would say just go out and start looking for animals, because that's really where the fun starts. When I was a kid, I was always a little boy that would be tasked with taking the trapped bird out of the classroom, or the one who was like playing with the slow worms in my neighbour's compost heap. And there's so much amazing animal stuff around. Like, it's so easy to find. Just look under a rock. I think there's so much inspiration to be found in your back garden.
I like that. Start off by looking under a rock. It's simple as that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Dan, I don't know how long we've been talking for. We've been talking for ages, but
ramble.
thank you so much for joining us. Again, for anybody that wants to see a little bit more footage and clips and pictures and images from Dan's adventures, just take a look in the description below and click on the link, which will take you to his Instagram page. Lots of amazing videos. The video of him with the baby pangolin is also there. Dan, I think we're going to have to call it a day there, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been great to chat. Speak to you soon.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Take care, Dan. Look after yourself. That was Dan O'Neill, everybody. And yeah, what a fantastic guy. He's out there trying to raise awareness and tell the stories of these very endangered, many endangered animals. Right, we have been going for quite a while now. I think it's time that we wrap up. We had a little hiccup at the start there, but you know, it's all part and parcel of making live shows and live vlogs. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. On Friday, we're going to be joined by adventurer and marine scientist Charlie Young. We're going to relive the moment a walk on the beach while she was on holiday turned into a full-blown wildlife operation, wildlife rescue operation, when she came across a giant, massive green turtle that found itself wedged between two boulders, and its time was quickly running out. Before we do go, again, another reminder, please, if you haven't already done so, take a few moments to click that subscribe button below. And also, I challenge you. My challenge to you is to share this video with at least one other person that you think would love to hear about Dan's wildlife adventures. Also, one more thing, it would mean the world to me if you could just spend a few moments of your time and write a comment below. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, subjects that you would, or animals that you'd like to hear about in the next episode of Wildlife, or in the upcoming episodes. I think it's time that we call it a wrap. I'm Patrick Guy. This has been Wild and Live. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. I will see